AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Arijit Saha. Arijit is the VP of Engineering at Noodle.ai. Arijit, welcome to the show.
Thank you, JP. Glad to be here.
That's our pleasure. So, Arijit, let's start with yourself. Can you give us a brief background on your journey in technology, where you got started, some of the roles you've held along the way, taking us up to your current position as the VP of Engineering for Noodle.ai?
So currently I'm VP of Engineering in Noodle. I lead our product engineering functions as well as all the technology functions, security, infrastructure, everything that has to do with developing and deploying our products for customers. So I started my career almost 20 years back, but even before that, let me maybe talk a little bit about the growing up days. So I grew up in India, and in those days, a little bit of dating myself, during those 90s, the part of India that I was growing up was a semi-urban neighborhood, and access to computer was not very common. Right? So the schools, not all the schools had computers classes available. My dad was an engineer in Indian Railways, so I used to go to his office sometimes, and then we'll play around with the computers a little bit, mostly games here and there, the games that were available at that point of time, but also like maybe use some text editors to type in something. So it was more of a fun. I didn't do any serious programming during school days. I wanted to follow my dad's footstep and then become an engineer. So for undergrad, I chose mechanical engineering as my subject. But during that time, I got introduced to programming, started with languages like C, C++, Java a little bit. And that's when during the undergrads, I kind of started falling in love with technology in general and programming, especially using coding to solve complex problems, like a lot of algorithms, so on and so forth. So post undergrad, I was a bit confused on where to continue. I started briefly as following my academic credentials as a quality engineer in a manufacturing firm. But then there were simultaneously two opportunities that came in front of me. One was either continuing that mechanical engineering journey, join a government owned, which is called a PSU in India. It's like a public sector undertaking. So these are big companies, firms owned by combination of state and central governments, which was considered like a dream career at that point of time by many engineers, right? Or otherwise, with the Y2K boom, the tech services space was kind of booming at that point of time. So companies like Infosys and then many others were growing very, very rapidly, right? So I also had the choice of joining Infosys as a software engineer, and then I chose that as my option, and then that's how kind of I got started with my journey in tech career.
Excellent. So now you find yourself as the VP of Engineering for Noodle.ai. Could you give us some insight first from the top level? Who are Noodle as a company? What are you guys doing? How is AI playing a part? And then we'll talk about your role as leading the engineering function.
So I joined Noodle at a very early stage in 2016. We had few data scientists at that point of time and the executive team, but none one from software engineering or a data engineering background. So initially, I joined in as the lead for data engineering and building the data engineering function. But then over time, my role has expanded towards managing all of engineering. So Noodle as a company, we are focused on building AI SaaS solutions, mostly in manufacturing and in supply chain. So we have data scientists, data engineers, software engineers, infrastructure engineers working on building these awesome products that are solving what we call the entropy that currently exists in different business operations in manufacturing as well as in supply chain. And then we see there is a huge opportunity in this space. So from a mission or vision perspective, our goal is to reduce the wastage in this world. And we see our products kind of fitting into that space where by reducing the entropy that currently exists in the operations, we will be helping eliminate the waste that gets generated out of, say, manufacturing processes or through supply chain management.
So I've done some previous podcasts with other companies operating in the supply chain space, and the more I learn about it, the more I realize how such a huge problem it is. Can you give us some insight into the scale of the problem that you're trying to tackle, just in terms of waste, the dollar amount annually that's involved, and then just how complex it is as you try to make some impact?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if you think of it, right, like factories, supply chains, or all the distribution systems, these were planned to sync perfectly and waste nothing, but then we are far from reality, right? So what happens, there have been many studies, right, like which kind of looks at the waste that gets generated in this world. And then if you see, a large amount of that comes from industrial waste. So there were some stats around about 15% of what gets manufactured, and then almost like 1/3 of all food just gets thrown out, right? So there were few studies that indicated about 635 billion of excess inventory was just stranded in supply chains, right? And then 97% of this waste is coming from this industry, right? So the scale is definitely huge. I think it's like an ocean, and then there are still like some small boats that we have which are trying to solve this problem, right? So worldwide, I think there is a huge market for this. There are obviously many solutions, but I think what happens currently is with the advancement of technology, I think that efficiency on how you can solve that problem has increased. Like the amount of data available, the amount of like the easy access to the computes. So all this coming together, and then it can help reduce this wastage to a level where I think it will make a significant difference for this world.
Absolutely. So now, focusing on your role as the head of the engineering group, can you give us some insight into what you and your team are working on, some of the day-to-day aspects of it, and what's behind the scenes from a machine learning and data science perspective that's making all of this happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have primarily two suite of products. One focused on more on manufacturing operation side of things, which we call Vulcan, and then the other one is more on the supply chain, which we call Athena. But if you think of it, these two can come together, and what it solves is what we think is this new category in the enterprise stack that we are now calling as flow ops or flow operations. So the flow operations is something we feel like is a new category where our applications are fitting. It's allowing the companies to kind of master all this chronic entropy and waste, and then pursue the perfect operations of flow, right? So whether it's from products to raw materials and then finished goods in the shelf. So one of the key aspect of our applications is also what we call using explainable AI. So it's not just recommending certain things or giving certain action items to the operators or to the planners. It's also doing it in a way where it's explainable, right? Like how this flow ops technology is making a recommendation. Like users should be able to understand and then provide feedback on that, because we believe it's the human and machine that's coming together to get the most effective solution, right? Like machines can learn from the data, but there are many other variables that humans can optimize. So through that explainable AI, we give an opportunity for our users to provide feedback, and that makes the AI even better by learning from it and adjusting to it, right? So yeah, if you think of it, it's not exactly a new concept. Like there are reinforcement learnings that's being used, but I think what was not happening is in the enterprise stack, we didn't see a lot of application of that, and that's where the new opportunity is. So yeah, coming to the team, so as I was mentioning earlier, it's a very cross-functional teams that we have that are working on this set of products. It's data scientists coming from traditional data science backgrounds, as well as machine learning engineers, then software engineers, data engineers. Because if you think of some of these problems, these are very complex problems with different kind of data sets that are involved, and analyzing those data, building the solutions in a way so that it's productizable, and then you can deploy it as a SaaS solution. So all these cross-functional teams kind of comes together and build these applications. So we follow that typical agile kind of structures that generally most of the product companies follow. So we have cross-functional squads. Then there are what we called as guilds, which is more like birds of same feather. So which is like data engineers have a way to know, like come together and discuss the various challenges around data engineering. The data scientist comes together and discusses. There is a forum to discuss the advancements that's happening in AI machine learning and work towards that. So on and so forth.
Excellent. So you already touched on it there, but I'd like to get some more context on the team. So you've talked about the skill sets and the roles. Obviously, you've been with Noodle now almost 4.5 years, and the product and the evolution of this space has changed dramatically. Could you give us some insight into the current makeup of the team and then the evolution of the product going forward and the types of people that you're going to need to hire to continue to evolve?
Yeah, so hiring definitely is one key area. And then a lot of these technologies are evolving so rapidly. So getting someone who can keep up to speed to the space of changes that are happening is always tricky, right? So yeah, we do have a lot of folks. If I think of the technology or the engineering organization, majority of it is primarily around data related work. So these are like data scientists, data engineering, like building the pipelines to get the data from our customers, being able to build code that analyzes that data, prepares that data for the machine learning model, and then the machine learning model itself that kind of is creating the mathematical formula and generating the results. So in terms of our product, there are like different kind of engines, which is more around like sensing the data, predicting the data, and then kind of optimizing on that. So typically each product will have these three kinds of engines, which needs heavy machine learning and then other AI related techniques, right? So that's kind of, I'll say, the majority of the engineering organization with those kind of skills. But then you also need very solid software engineers, DevOps, quality engineers, who kind of help put it in a productized context, right? So that we can deploy this as an AI SaaS solution and then host it in a cloud. So we are completely cloud-based solutions. All of our products are hosted on a cloud. We do have our own infrastructure too, and do use some of the public cloud services too. So we do have like an infrastructure team then that's supporting that, and then DevOps, QE, those are kind of supporting functions.
Excellent. So you and I were speaking previously about the new stack that is coming through, and when you look at 2021, you've got some exciting new projects in store. Could you give us some insight into that? What are you most excited about, and what can we expect to see from Noodleai in the next year?
Yeah, no, it's a rapid growth or rapid expansion that's happening. So with that, obviously the scale of problems also grows, right? So I think from a technical perspective, that's kind of the biggest area of focus. How do we continue to scale our products and solve more and more complex problems? So there is a lot of work that's happening in our product roadmaps in the AI ML area. There is a lot of work happening in terms of making our products more efficient and making it more, as I was earlier mentioning, explainable AI, right? So that's like concept wise, it sounds simple, but obviously doing it means you need to have that similar, like you need to build that user experience, right? It's explaining some of the machine learning, like under the hood, what's happening is not very easy. So it has to be intuitive for a planner or for a manufacturing operator to understand. So which means the design becomes very, very, very critical, right? And then the UI. So we take a lot of pride in the way we build these user experiences and this UIs that we present to our customers, which we feel makes it much more easier for them to use it on a day-to-day basis. I think that's kind of the key for success of our products. We can solve like the most complex mathematical problems, but if we cannot fit it into this operations flow, then it will not be a successful product, right? So making customers happy and then kind of positioning our products in a way that leads to improve profits. And then when we see this flow, there are like multiple areas, right? So one is obviously your product flow related, as I was mentioning, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's the raw material from raw material to the finished product, or whether within the supply chain, whether it's inventory, whether it's both on the supply and demand side of things, how things are flowing. And then there are cash flows. There are, to some extent, even people flows, right? Like think of the happiness that a planner will have by having an effective tool that tells them in an explainable way, like these are top 5 things that you need to focus on to get these results. I think that has a lot of power. I'm super excited, I think, with the opportunity that we have. And I personally feel a lot about the mission that we have. I think waste is a big significant problem. And I feel like our products will help solve that problem to some extent, but there is obviously a lot more to do. And then, yeah, anyone interested, obviously we have a lot of information available on our website too. So
Arijit, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on, talking to us today about Noodle.ai and the supply chain industry as a whole. You know, when we look at use case applications for data science and ML and automation, supply chain is an obvious area, and there's so much to be done, and clearly Noodle.ai have identified that and are already doing some great work. So thank you for sharing everything that's happening and exciting growth ahead. So we wish you guys all the best.
Thanks, JP. Thanks for having me.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.